Okay, welcome back, everybody. Sorry, there were some technical difficulties. I'll have to splice these two parts together. Um, but like I was saying before we got cut off, the scene with the stuffed animals, like where they're establishing boundaries, was one of the few scenes I really enjoyed, and I feel like I connected with them as people. Because those are the few scenes that like it didn't feel like they were robots saying lines. It felt like they were people. And not that I necessarily wanted more humor in the film. I just wanted more human moments. Because there is another time, another scene where they were at lunch and she's like, "Oh, I'm using the smaller fork. I'm doing it on purpose." And he's like, "I think both my forks are the same size, actually." I don't little moments like that where I'm like, "Oh, you are people. Okay, I can dig that."
Yeah, it's the whole film is very cold and very austere, and there's not a lot of human connection between any of the characters, so it's really nice in those moments when you do get to see that.
Exactly. Okay. So the next plot point I have is he fakes a robbery within her apartment and then he tells her about it and then she ends up apologizing to him. Um yeah, this probably frustrate one of the most frustrating points in the movie for me.
Yeah, that this is a classic 21-year-old in a relationship with an older man move. This is a this is just an oldie but a goodie in terms of like why you shouldn't date people who are so much more experienced than you when you're not emotionally ready for it because you will be gaslit into these situations where you think things are your fault and they're not. Yeah, it's definitely super frustrating and just the sense of violation, like when he goes into her like drawers and like steals all of her jewelry. That's like those were like obviously heirloom pieces that probably had sentimental value to her, and you can just feel the sense of violation from her and
Exactly.
betrayal when she finds out that it was him the whole time.
Exactly, because from the moment that scene started, I felt like there was something weird. Like, because she's going up to the front door, he opens it before she can like unlock the door, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, you've been robbed." And then I'm just like, "Okay, what were you doing there?" Then he's like, "I'm going to call the police." I'm like, "Why haven't you already?" And then like he ends up getting really frustrated, and then she doesn't even have time to be emotionally distraught about the situation because then she has to comfort him about his frustration, which we know afterward was fake. And then in the scene where he's like, "Oh yeah, no, I did that. I sold all your stuff for drug money." And then he's just like, "Well, there are certain things about my life that I don't need to tell you about, just like there's certain things about your life you don't need to tell me about." And then turns it around on her, and I don't, that was just so frustrating.
Yeah, and Tom Burke, I think that's his name, who plays Anthony, is yeah, really great in these scenes because of how ooh annoying and frustrating and he is from somebody looking from the outside in. Like you can sense, you physically react to like the way he's being with her, but you can also see how she's seeing it and how like maybe he seems totally reasonable to her. Because he is charming and he's saying things in a way that like, if you haven't been around the block, like they might make sense. So I feel like he's very good and subtle in these scenes.
Exactly. Like I was definitely squirming in my chair in that scene where they're just having the conversation and he's turning it on her. Like I was just squirming in my seat, like, no, how could you fall for this? And it just I don't know, it drove me nuts. Um so then the next plot point I have is after the second time they have sex, when he takes her to Venice, when they go to, I think, the opera or the orchestra, whatever live event they went to. Afterward, there's like a montage where they're having sex again. But then when she goes back to film school and is trying to film her student project, like even one of her classmates is like, "You really don't look good. Are you okay? Are you okay?" And she's like, "I'm not. I'm fine. I'm just not feeling well. I'm not feeling well." And then she gets a home visit from the doctor, who she doesn't want to talk to about her sexual activity because he's like, "Well, you got something." And I mean, there are many ways in order to contract a virus. I mean, is there something you're not telling me? And she's just like, no, no. So what do you think exactly it is that he gave her?
I don't. I'm assuming uh, some sexually transmitted illness. I don't know specifically what, but I like that it's just sort of like left out there, and it's not like because it doesn't. I don't think it needs to be necessarily like pinned down. Like, oh, he gave you this or he gave you that. Just sort of like putting that out into the universe that he's kind of scummy is, yeah, is like enough.
I mean, I think it will probably be addressed in the sequel. Not to get too far ahead, we'll talk about that at the end. But I think in the Souvenir Part Two, I think that might be the focus of the plot. Um, from my what I thought it was, I was thinking, I'm like, wait, it's the 80s. She had flu-like symptoms. The doctor can't pin it down. Did he give her AIDS? Because he is a drug user. He does use needles a lot. Obviously, that's not the cleanest thing in the world to do. So my thought was AIDS, but when I was talking to my sister about it afterward, she was like, "Well, maybe she's pregnant. Maybe that's what the souvenir is." And I was like, "Possibly," but again, I won't know until part two.
That's, I mean, that's a good point with the title. I just can't get over, like, I don't know if I've seen a movie less in need of a sequel than The Souvenir,
Yeah,
but
I just think it's funny that at the end of the credits they do like the Marvel thing, like the souvenir will return with part two. I was like, wait, what?
yeah, I missed that. I hightailed it out of there. I had a screening of The Dead Don't Die that I needed to get to, so I was like, not sticking around for the post-credit sequence. Also, didn't know there was one, so.
Yeah, I mean, I just sat there because I had like a while. I had like a half an hour until my bus got there, so I usually sit through the credits when I have a little extra time. But everyone else in my audience, the three other people, got out of there once the credits started, and they did not look happy about watching this movie at all. Um, and it was
Yeah,
just kind of funny.
that was sort of the same experience that I had with my showing. There were probably like four other people there, and the the theater was closed until like 3 minutes before it started, like the actual cinema part of it. There was a sign on the door that said like "Do not enter, maintenance," and then a manager came and took the sign down, and me and the other youngish person there were like, okay, whatever. But then there were these two women in their late 60s who were so offended by the fact that we couldn't get into this movie. They're like, this is unacceptable. This movie better be so good. I can't believe this. And when we left the movie, I don't think they thought it was incredible. So
Yeah, no, there was a woman because my bus ended up being late because I didn't realize it was the last day of school around here, so there was a lot of high school kids on my
ooh.
bus, and so we ended up getting uh down into Santa Cruz like 20 minutes late. So I walked in during the trailers, and there was one woman sitting across the row from me who kind of kept looking over me like, "Why are you at this movie?" And then there was another older couple, probably in their 40s or so, who came in like 10 minutes late and were confused the entire movie, even though they didn't miss anything really. They just missed the party sequence. But you just because it was such an empty theater, you can hear the woman leaning over to the man being like, "Wait, who's that guy? Wait, what's going on? Wait, is he on drugs? I'm confused." Like I'm just like, "Oh gosh. Oh no."
That's also the thing with the AMC A list. This is like off topic, but the fact like I have AMC A list where you can see 3 movies a week for $24 a month. So that's like what, 12 or 16 movies a month. I feel like people they don't care as much if they get there on time anymore because a lot of people are doing that where it's like whatever, I'm not really paying for this movie. There was a man who walked into my screening of this movie um 30 minutes probably into it and sat one seat away from me in an empty theater with four other people in it. I was so mad. Like, get
Oh,
away from
yeah, no, that a similar thing happened to me when I was at Booksmart the week prior. There was a guy that came in like 15 minutes late, and it was me in one section of the theater, and then there was a few teenagers like in the middle. And for some reason, like it's a very big auditorium, and he decided to sit like directly in front of me at Booksmart. I'm like, why?
No,
Yeah, that was
no.
weird.
Honestly, like I will give you the side eye if you sit in my row if it's an empty theater or like in my direct line of sight. Like especially if you're coming in late, sit on the sides. Like you don't need to come sit in the middle. It's like, come on, theater etiquette 101.
Exactly. Okay, here, let's get back on track because I have like 8 minutes left before I have to leave this meeting room because there's somebody else
Okay.
that does have to come in here. So it gets to the point where she's even driving him to a house, obviously, where he can buy drugs. Because there's a couple different scenes where she's waiting in the car and he goes in this house and he comes out. And the first time it happens, that was another human moment I kind of liked, where he gets in the car and they're sitting in the car silently, and then he just gives her this face like, drive, like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, that was a human moment. I like that.
Yeah.
And then what else happens? Oh, and then later in the movie, yeah, he goes nuts. Like she's trying to sleep. He goes nuts in the middle of the night. Like smashes the mirror, the very large wall-sized mirror she has in her living room. And then like she just kind of comes up to the living room and he's just kind of like groaning and bloody.
He's got the DTs, right? Like he's trying to quit and he can't.
I think
I
so.
think
Well,
that's the,
because I think that's because I know the mirror gets smashed at some point. If I'm correct, I think that's when it does, unless it happened during another point.
yeah. Yeah, I mean it makes sense. That would
So I
be
think because at first I was like, wait, why is he bloody and groaning? It wasn't until after like later that night I was like, oh, the mirror was smashed when her mom came over. He must have like smashed it. That's why he was like grabbing at his hand and he was bloody. I don't know. That's the most sense I could make out of that. And then the next point is when she comes home and there's an obvious drug dealer in her apartment and she tells him to get the hell out and to not come back. And this was the point where the couple sitting like a few rows back and across the aisle from me like leaned over and she was like, "Wait, who's that guy?" And I was like, "You can't put two and two together, lady. Okay, that was a drug dealer. Obviously, he has a drug problem."
Like literally all you need to know is that he is a shady person in her home that her boyfriend decided like it was okay to let be in there. Like you don't
Exactly.
that's all you need to know. It's horrifying. Stuff like that, I feel like as a woman like those things get me because I'm like, "Ooh, like I don't want you in my house. Get out of my house. You need to leave now." And then when they're not leaving, it's like, "Ah." Very
Exactly.
scary.
I mean, I did think that was a good scene though, because she finally took charge of somebody and like, stated like you need to get out and then like gets him out. I'm just like, yeah, good for you. You did something.
Yeah, this line in the sand, like this is you need to leave.
Okay, and then for after her 25th birthday, her mom is staying with her for a little bit, and then she's like waiting up for her boyfriend to get home, and he never comes back because he ends up ODing, and that's how the relationship ends. Because I mean, they do break up for like 5 minutes in the movie, and then she lets him back in, but this was the only way the relationship actually ended was he had to die.
Yeah, it was the note made me really sad that she left outside for him. It's like, God, you can like be so mad at a person, but
Exactly.
then you still leave the note and it's like, ah, this sweet girl, like you deserve so much better.
Exactly. Okay, and then in the last scene of the movie where it gets 120% meta, where she's shooting the scene of the actress and they're doing this dolly shot where they're like pushing in on the actress's face. But while that's happening, in the movie we're watching, we are also pushing in on our main character's face while she's supervising someone pushing in on an actress's face, and then she stares directly into the camera to acknowledge the audience.
It's a good shot.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, because there were several shots that kind of blew me away, and I'm like, okay, movie, I can't be completely mad at you, and that was one of them because I'm like, one, it's a good shot. Two, it's incredibly meta because she's literally directing the same shot that we're watching of her.
yeah, I mean, this is an undeniably like really beautiful film from a like cinematography standpoint. Like it is just it's gorgeous. Yeah, so I just wish there were more moments where I connected with it because it's like it makes me think of in Ferris Bueller when they're talking about Cameron's house and he's like, it's very cold and you can't touch anything. Like it's just this museum-like space where it's just beautiful, but it's not accessible.
Exactly. It was really hard for me to really latch on to anybody, to connect with anybody. Because, like I said, for most of the movie, they do feel like robots reading lines at each other. And there are like 3 or 4 moments where they do feel like people. And I just needed more of that.
Hmm.
Because
I
I was,
almost,
oh,
sorry, go
sorry,
on.
go on. No, no, go on. Go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know how much of it is just a cultural difference, like upper class, like English people from like old backgrounds have this sort of way of interacting with each other that feels very like, like you're following a script. I don't know, like, so I feel like part of it's that, but then also part of it is like a very intentional like style that Joan Hog's going for. So,
Exactly. Because I later that night, I was still thinking about this movie, obviously, and I could think of 3 other movies that involve a toxic relationship that I think are better movies than this one. The Graduate, Phantom Thread, and a movie that came out earlier this year, Gloria Bell. And in the case of Phantom Thread, that is also about upper class British people, but that movie has way more life to it than this one does.
yeah, the thing about Phantom Thread is that it's a dysfunctional relationship. They both have such strong personalities, and I feel like that is part of what pulls you in. It's like just these combative personalities, and I think there is like a good amount of humor in that movie too. Like some of the things that Daniel Day-Lewis says, you're just like, "What? That's amazing." But yeah, I feel like it is easier to connect to those characters.
Yeah. So I mean overall, because I have to go in literally a minute. Overall, I still can't decide whether I like this movie or not. There are definitely points I admire and definitely points that frustrate me. But if I want to watch a movie about a toxic relationship, I rather watch The Graduate, Phantom Thread, or Gloria Bell, all movies that I own.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like I appreciate it. I think it's a beautifully made film. I want to see more from this director. This particular film with these particular characters, maybe it's not for me, and that's fine. That's okay. Not all movies are made for all people.
Yeah,
So,
but will you go see the second one? Because I think I will. It does make me sad that Robert Pattinson is not going to be in it. I don't know if you heard about that. He was supposed to
he
be
has to
in.
be the Batman.
Yeah, because he had scheduling conflicts, and he had announced, I think it was yesterday, that he couldn't be in the Souvenir Part Two.
Yeah, I did see that. Those Bruce Wayne commitments, you got to make them. Um,
Exactly.
Probably won't see. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll see it in theaters. I might just see it at some point. I don't know. I see everything eventually,
Right.
but yeah.
And whenever that one comes out, maybe we could talk about that one too.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I gotta get going. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here with me and talking to me about this movie.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about the audio problems.
It's okay. It happens. Don't worry about it.
All right,
Okay.
well,
And okay, thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
bye.